Now, if you're new to my story, I urge you to read the first part. While it does not tie directly into this one, it is a good jumping off point. If anything, it was the catalyst that got me some answers. So I mentioned last that I discovered my mom was a victim of black magic. It wasn't exactly a discovery, as much as it was me forcing her to tell me some ghost stories, and she resignedly decided that she'd freak me out more by being truthful than I wanted. It all started when a boy met a girl and decided that he would marry that girl. But alas, since the boy and girl were from different races and religions, her parents forbade it. You have to understand that back then, such racism was quite common. You tolerated one another, had friends across races, but under no circumstance could you intermarry without raising the first ire of your entire family. Admittedly, not every family reacted that dramatically, but it happened. Religion and race went hand in hand, and to jump ship would not just be taken as a betrayal of your gods, but of your family as well. Many a child were disowned because they dared to love outside their comfort zone. Fortunately, this isn't the case now, and also since I am of mixed percentage, all I can say is, what the hell, Grandpa? Ideally though, this would have been the end of it, but as you can guess, the man was not done. He was determined to marry my mother, and by force if necessary. Personally, I thought he dodged a bullet, but no one said he was smart. His actions, I felt, were more of a result of the insults and aggression he received from my uncles, rather than their dismissal of his proposal. Maybe he would have left her alone if they were cordial, but firm toward him. But history is what it is, and while we may argue over his actual intentions, the man was determined to force my mom's family into submission. He resorted to employing the services of someone called a bomo. A bomo is a Malay shaman, and this person can be downright terrifying, simply because he can use the worst kind of supernatural elements to ruin you. One such thing a bomo commonly uses is a toil. This is a fetus brought back through dark magic and used by the bomo to play tricks, steal from, or torment individuals. The toil can presumably also bring good luck upon their handler, so long as they're well fed through the blood taken from the toes. Of course, there are many variations of these stories, because as you know, such things evolve, but I am telling this to you as I knew it back then. But he didn't use anything as pedestrian as a toil on my mother. For her family's transgressions, he would unleash the full force of his power on her. He afflicted her with a curse. It started innocuously at first. She came down with a flu, got really weak. No one thought anything of it. She went to the doctor, got some medications, and stayed home to be nursed back to health by my grandmother. But after the first week, when she wasn't getting any better, concern spread. Back to the doctor she went, and stronger medication was given. But one more week passed, and she seemed to be deteriorating, almost wasting away to a curious ailment that no medicine seemed to be able to cure. Being deeply spiritual people, the whole country pretty much was back then, her brothers realized something could actually be amiss, and so it was that 2 weeks after she became sick, that the man came knocking on their door. Defiantly, he stood facing my uncles, a sly smile on his lips. For some time, it was like a standoff, neither party wanting to make a move, even with the player being revealed. When he spoke, it was simply to say that he will let him marry my mother, and only then will the curse be lifted. My uncles grew angry and threw him out, threatening to kill him if he came back, but he left, laughing. My mom only worsened from that day forward. She was always a small woman, as I mentioned back in the first post, but now she was wasting away, turning into a living skeleton before their eyes. She'd fade in and out of consciousness, and when she awoke, sometimes it was to scream that someone was sitting on her, or that there was a stranger standing behind my uncles, staring at her with angry red eyes. In times such as these, your only recourse is to fight fire with fire, and so it was to a holy man that my uncles went for help. Thus began what I can only describe as an intense spiritual battle between two warring forces. To me, this all sounded interesting but completely hard to believe. I mean, like Mulder, I wanted to believe, but it was so far out of the realm of possibility that it's tough to wrap your head around it. But my mother swears by this, and so too did a few of my uncles who did agree to tell me bits of the story, albeit reluctantly. Their reticence gives the story some credence, I believe. Throughout this whole ordeal, there would come days when my mother would be returned to full health, and she would function like a normal human, with no hint of any such curse having been placed upon her. But as quickly as her health returned, so too did the curse. A few days of positive results yielded several more days of pain for her and uncertainty for her family. And every time she succumbed, my uncles would see the man. He never came knocking on the door again, but they would see him standing in the distance, staring, or they would catch a glimpse of him in a crowd. And every time they saw him, my mother got worse. She started babbling about a grinning man that would stand in the corner of her room and stare at her throughout the entire night. Was this the same man I saw in my dreams? I honestly do not know. It was a dark and trying time for my mother and her family, and it was also the reason why she started to go to church with intent of converting to Catholicism. I'm not going to judge the switch of religions, nor am I going to argue that one religion is more potent than the other, but with that said, she did improve when she began going to church. This, with the help of the holy man, had managed to subvert much of the curse. The man whom had the Bomo cast the curse became angrier, and this, my uncles took as a sign that he was losing. It is important to say that this entire ordeal lasted for quite a long time. Over a year passed when she went back and forth between winning and potentially dying. When she began to recover, fully this time, my grandmother matchmade her with my father, a good and strong man who once told me that his closet brush with the supernatural was with a Ouija board, and even then it was a mild experience. That he was of a different race as well raises all sorts of social questions, but no one really cared to ask those questions back then. Anyway, it is important to note that even though she seemed cleared of the curse and protected, as she said, by the Holy Spirit, that there is no way for someone to have been this close to the supernatural and not be saturated with it. I think this is why I am susceptible to the realm of the supernatural. After all, when she was pregnant with me, the man had yet to give up. She told me that the last time she ever saw him was on a Saturday afternoon, just after novena had ended. He stood outside the gates of the church, staring at her angrily, staring at her pregnant belly, staring at me. All the nightmares I had endured, the feeling of someone sitting on my chest and whispering incomprehensible things into my ears while I stared wide-eyed at the dark ceiling, made some sense. It also made sense why I felt more secure sleeping beneath the altar rather than in my own bed. Again, I do not think that one religion is ever the antagonist of another, but I believe it was simply a battle between good and evil. My mother was subjected to intense evil, and it was only through the divine intervention that she was saved, that I was saved, over the brother that should have come before me, but had died in the womb instead. And to answer someone whom had inquired as to whether the new house we moved into was blessed, yes it was. Which really goes to show you that once you've gotten a taste of potent evil magics, you're marked for life. Everything that I've experienced had spun off this. But I still cannot bring myself to fully believe this story of my mom's. How could anyone? But if the first post was my origin story, then this was its prequel. Today's NoSleep story, part 2, again comes from username CACX. New videos every week. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And sweet dreams.